My brother stole my identity and racked up $100,000 in debt. When I took him to court, he said, "You can't prove it." The judge replied, "Oh, but we can." I never thought I'd find myself at the heart of a real-life family betrayal, the kind that spirals into courtrooms, loan sharks, and quiet, vengeful silences. I mean, sure, my brother Roderick had always been the problem one. But family's family, right? We all put up with each other's quirks, everyone's flaws. That's what we were raised to believe in Savannah, Georgia, where family loyalty was as essential as Sunday service and pecan pie. Or so I thought. Let me back up a bit. I'm Beauregard, but everyone calls me Beau. I grew up in a modest but well-kept house just a few blocks from Forsyth Park, in the oldest part of Savannah. My dad was a strong, old-school type who worked as a mechanic and fixed pretty much everything else in our house too. Mom, a soft-spoken, gentle woman, taught piano lessons from home and kept a strict line on the family before all principle. Roderick, well, Roddy as we called him growing up, was the kind of guy who took every single one of those family values and bent them to breaking point. I was 3 years older than him, and while I was always bookish and a bit reserved, Roddy was the kind to test every limit, ignore every warning. But I figured that was just the phase he was in, a kind of rebellious streak he'd eventually grow out of. I had no idea just how far he'd go. The truth hit me like a punch in the gut. It was around 5 years ago when I got a call from a bank in Charleston, a bank I'd never even heard of, asking if I was aware of late payments on a new car loan. I remember sitting there, gripping my cell phone so tight my knuckles went white. "Car loan?" I asked, feeling my heart sink. "I don't have a car loan with you." The woman on the other end of the line cleared her throat awkwardly. "Well, sir, I have your name here, Beauregard L. Wainwright. And your address in Savannah matches the documents. I just need to confirm you aren't behind on payments for the amount of, let's see here, $22,000 on a 2015 Mercedes-Benz." I remember laughing, yes, laughing, out of sheer disbelief. "I drive a Honda Civic from 2007, ma'am." "What are you talking about?" There was a pause, and then, in a quieter voice, she asked, "Sir, are you saying you didn't apply for this loan?" And that's how it all started unraveling. Within days, I pulled my credit report, and my stomach dropped. I was staring at nearly $100,000 in debt tied to my name. There were not only the car loans but credit cards maxed out at Macy's, JCPenney, Lowe's, even a loan for some fancy gym membership in Atlanta. I felt my face flush, a raw anger building up inside of me. Someone had signed me up for debts I'd never touched in places I'd never even been. I didn't know where to begin. But as I scanned through the list, piecing together details, one face kept flashing in my mind. Roderick. My own brother. It wasn't just a hunch, it was all adding up. There was a blurry memory of him borrowing my ID a while back, saying he'd misplaced his for a weekend trip to Myrtle Beach. At the time, it seemed harmless, just Roddy being Roddy. But that nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. He knew my social security number, my address. Hell, he even knew my passwords for a lot of things. I decided to confront him. Now, this was not a task I took lightly. Roderick had a way of turning every confrontation into a spectacle. He was always on the defensive, always one step ahead with some excuse or counterattack. But I had to know. So, I called him up and asked to meet at Betty Lou's, a little diner just off Congress Street. When he arrived, he sauntered in as if he didn't have a care in the world. He threw his leather jacket over the back of the booth, gave me a lazy grin, and slid into the seat across from me. His hair was slicked back, and he looked a little more polished than usual. Too polished, if you ask me. "Beau, my man," he greeted, reaching across the table to clap my shoulder. "What's up?" "Roddy," I replied, my voice deadpan. "Got a question for you." He paused, mid-reach for the menu, glancing up at me with an exaggerated, innocent look. "Oh? What did I do this time?" "Cut the crap," I shot back, unable to contain the anger in my voice. "I got a call from a bank in Charleston. And a few other banks. Seems I'm suddenly on the hook for a bunch of loans and credit cards I didn't sign up for. Nearly $100,000. And when I say I didn't sign up, I mean someone else did. So, let me ask you something, are you the one who signed my name on these loans?" Roderick's face didn't even twitch. He leaned back, folding his arms over his chest, and gave me a slow, mocking smile. "Oh, come on, Beau. You think I'd do that to you?" He gave a low, scoffing laugh, as if the idea itself was absurd. "Yes, I think you'd do exactly that," I replied coldly. I pushed a copy of the credit report across the table toward him. "Explain this." He glanced down, shrugged, and pushed it back without even looking twice. "Look, man, you're probably just confused. Credit reports mix things up all the time. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe you bought a few things and forgot about them." "Forget?" I could feel the heat rising in my face. "A car loan? A timeshare in Miami? How would I forget that, Roddy?" He shrugged, still calm, still annoyingly composed. "Look, I don't know what you want me to say, Beau. I didn't do it. End of story. Maybe you need to lay off the bourbon for a while, start remembering what you're actually spending your money on. I wanted to reach across the table and shake him. Lay off the bourbon? I hissed. You think this is funny? You think I'm joking around about someone destroying my life? Whoa, calm down there, he said, finally sounding a little annoyed. He looked around, making a show of glancing at the other patrons in the diner as if I was the one causing a scene. Look, brother, you're just. Well, I don't know what you are right now. But you're way off base. At that point, I felt this surge of rage, like something I'd never felt before. He was sitting there, treating this like a game, and it made me sick. Give me your credit report, I demanded, slamming my hand down on the table. He recoiled slightly, looking at me like I'd slapped him. What? You heard me. If you're so innocent, let me see your credit report. Right now. He stared at me for a long moment, the mask slipping for just a second. And that second was all I needed. He didn't have a response. Didn't even try to fake one. His face hardened, and his voice dropped to a sneer. You're paranoid, you know that? Paranoid and pathetic. Without another word, he pushed back his chair, grabbed his jacket, and walked out, leaving me sitting there with my heart pounding. The betrayal settled in, deep and unshakable. This wasn't some prank, some little mistake. My own brother had signed my name, taken my identity, and walked off with everything I'd worked for. After that day in the diner, I was beyond furious, I was downright determined. Roderick thought he could just waltz away, pretend none of this was real, and I'd drop it because we were family. He couldn't have been more wrong. If there's one thing you don't do, it's take advantage of family, especially your own brother. I was going to make him pay, even if it meant tearing our entire family apart in the process. The first step was hiring a lawyer. I was done trying to handle this on my own. I needed someone who understood the ins and outs of identity theft, someone who wouldn't back down just because we were dealing with a family matter. That's when I found Miriam Watson, an Atlanta attorney who specialized in fraud cases. She was fierce, no nonsense, and had an icy determination that almost scared me. I remember her looking over my case file, her lips tightening as she read through Roderick's trail of deceit. Beauregard, she said, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms. This is going to be messy. You realize this is your brother, right? Yeah, I replied, feeling the weight of it but not wavering. But he's made his choice. He's the one who's messed up, not me. Miriam gave a slight nod of approval. Good. Because we're going to nail him to the wall. Over the next few weeks, Miriam and I worked tirelessly. She guided me in gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Bank statements, old texts, even photos where he was flaunting items that he'd bought with my name on them. One photo on his Instagram had him posing in front of a sleek black Mercedes, the exact same one I was apparently paying off. When I confronted my parents about what I was doing, they were horrified. My mom sat there, wringing her hands, her eyes misty. Beau, she whispered, her voice cracking, he's your brother. How can you do this? How could he do this to me? I shot back, barely containing my anger. You expect me to let this go because we share blood? He ruined my life, Mom. I'm drowning in debt I never asked for. I lost my house because of him. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. My father sat beside her, his face like stone. Son, he said quietly, your mother's right. This will destroy the family. No, I replied firmly. Roderick already did that. They didn't say another word. They just sat there, looking helpless and old, as if the years had finally caught up to them. But I couldn't let that sway me. My brother had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let him ruin my life out of some misplaced sense of family loyalty. When the day finally came to take Roderick to court, I could feel the tension boiling under my skin. Roderick showed up in a cheap suit, looking a bit haggard. He didn't even make eye contact with me as he sat down with his lawyer, a sleazy-looking guy who had the air of someone who'd defend just about anyone for the right price. Roderick's defense was simple: deny, deny, deny. He didn't do it. This was all a misunderstanding. I was being paranoid. He thought he could bluff his way through it. But he hadn't counted on Miriam. Miriam was relentless. When it was time for her to present our case, she dismantled Roderick's lies piece by piece, pulling out every scrap of evidence we had. She presented records showing that Roderick had used my social security number to open accounts. She brought in credit card statements with charges in places I'd never been. But the final blow was the recording she'd obtained from one of the credit card companies, a recording of Roderick, using his own voice to impersonate me. The moment that played in court, his face paled. Miriam leaned in, her voice dripping with contempt. Is that you on the recording, Mr. Wainwright? Using your brother's name to open a line of credit? Roderick tried to stammer his way out of it, but it was useless. His lawyer sat there, slack-jawed, clearly blindsided. There was no way out now. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Caldwell, looked at him with cold disapproval. She didn't need to say anything, the look on her face was enough. But Roderick wasn't done yet. He stood up, his face twisted in anger, and pointed at me. You think you're better than me, Bo? He sneered. You think you're some saint? You were always the favorite, the golden child. I was just taking back what was mine. I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my face neutral. He wasn't going to get a reaction from me, not here. I just stared at him, letting the silence fill the room. Judge Caldwell banged her gavel, cutting off Roderick's rant. Enough, Mr. Wainwright, she said, her voice sharp. Your jealousy does not excuse your actions. You abused your brother's trust, and you will face the consequences. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering Roderick to repay every cent he'd stolen from me. She also handed him a 6-month jail sentence for the identity theft. It wasn't a long sentence, but it was enough. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be cornered, to lose control of his own life. As they led him out of the courtroom, he shot me one last venomous look. You'll regret this, Bo, he hissed. You'll see. I didn't respond. Watching him go, there was no satisfaction, just a hollow ache where the love for my brother had once been. In the days that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The debts were finally cleared, and I started working on my credit again, bit by bit. But I wasn't done with Roderick. He still owed me, and I wanted him to feel every ounce of betrayal he'd put me through. The final act of revenge came a few months later. I found out Roderick was trying to rebuild his own life, trying to open a small business in a town a few hours away. He needed investors, people to trust him, and word was he'd managed to gather a few gullible folks willing to back him. But I wasn't about to let him slip away that easily. I contacted every single one of his investors, sharing the court records, the transcripts, the evidence of his fraud. I made sure they knew exactly who they were dealing with. Within days, every last one of them backed out. His business dreams crumbled before they'd even started. The last I heard, Roderick was working minimum wage jobs, trying to scrape by. We don't speak anymore. My parents still haven't forgiven me, and maybe they never will. But I sleep well at night, knowing he's finally paying the price for everything he took from me. And that, right there, is the true meaning of family loyalty. Sometimes, the most loyal thing you can do is hold someone accountable.